Hey guys, so we've talked heavily on Twitter especially about possible leaks being fake or rumors being fake leading up to E3, because this right now is the time where you will start seeing them pop up because websites or sources want to try to make a name for themselves by reporting on rumors or leaks that necessarily aren't true. And the most recent one seems to have popped up on a Japanese blog, Hokanko, and they're talking about the possibility of Sony showing up to E3 with a handheld gaming system. And what happened here is they seem to have a leak of some kind, again, according to them, from E3's Sony booth and everything, where they're talking about showing up there with a new piece of hardware, and they have automatically made the assumption that it would be a handheld device rather than, say, a new PlayStation Pro Slim, for example, that I think is more likely. But with that out of the way, guys, let's talk about the possibility of a new PlayStation portable system being at E3, and if it makes sense for them to do this at E3, Sony in particular, because things are going so well for them, it feels like trying to put a handheld out there might be a bad idea. Now, they're going to say that, of course, they would work with AMD, since right now the PS4, even the Xbox One, use AMD chipsets, and realistically, they would probably stick with them and just partner with, say, the AMD Bristol Ridge setup instead, and by doing that, maybe they get a better cost, since of course they are giving them a ton of money for the PS4 with the chipsets that are in there and how many PS4s are moving off the shelves and how many are being produced. Maybe they get a better deal that way. Don't go anywhere near Nvidia, because of course Nintendo probably has a contract with them that says you are exclusive to us in terms of the gaming division right now, and again, they'll probably get a better deal from AMD anyway. And Bristol Ridge right now is their newest system on a chip that is efficient, does not pull a ton of power. They seem to have the TDP right around 15 watts, which is still kind of high to put in a tablet. This chipset has not been used in anything less than a laptop so far, and that of course has enough space with a copper heat pipe and a fan that is much larger than, say, the one that is in the Switch. And could they put Bristol Ridge in a smaller device? Possibly, but keep in mind it would not be that small, and it would absolutely need active cooling, so it would be very similar to the Switch, where they would have a fan and heat pipe and everything. They would probably still have to customize it so that it works correctly, otherwise it would hit this thermal limit. So of course, if they wanted to put a proper handheld device out there, they would have to make it at least sleek enough and thin enough to where you can call it that and not call it a laptop that is missing the top hinge part of its screen. I think the far more likely situation here would be that they go back a little bit, maybe a year before that, and go with something like the Merlin series, where they are doing the Merlin Falcon chipset. That seems a little more likely. For example, the Smock Z is using that right now, at least they're trying to. We'll see if that ever comes out, but they're at least trying to use it, and they're talking about trying to passively cool that chipset, which would be very interesting. And really, if Sony can put it out as a passively cooled system, then they're in business. Otherwise, they could probably adopt the same situation that the Switch has, where they use an active cooled fan and a heat pipe and keep it just as cool as what the Switch is now. And realistically, looking at it, the AMD Merlin Falcon chipset would be more cost effective for Sony, so they wouldn't have to charge an arm and a leg, which seems to be a mistake that they do a lot with the PSP and the Vita. And at that point, it's a more well-known chip. I think it'd be easier for companies to use it, and it can still do everything that the X1 could pretty much do. And at that point, it can do the same kind of stuff in terms of visuals, possibly better visuals as well, depending on what they decide to clock the chip at. And we've seen all the mock-ups, all the weird-looking mock-ups. The one in particular that seems to be floating around a lot does not look good. I don't really know if people seem to think that looks good. I look at it and I just think it just does not look sleek or modern. It looks weird. It looks like something I'd have a hard time selling in a store if I was working behind the counter, because it kind of looks like an iPad with the cover permanently attached to it. And then the controller slides do not look good at all. The one thing about the Switch is when you have the Joy-Cons on, it looks very uniform. It looks like they belong on there, whereas that mock-up looks like those are just hanging off of it. What's even uglier, though, is the concept that Sony, I guess the patent that they filed, people found, and that looks really bad. That does not look good at all. Same issue, same situation, does not look uniform when the controllers are attached. Now, keep in mind, the patent would definitely not be what would come out. They would definitely refine it so that it looks sleek and modern. Sony could pretty much do that, pretty well, I would say. Their phones generally looked okay. They didn't look, bulky or large or anything. The Vita looked good. The PSP looked good when it came out for the technology it was packing. So I think they can design a pretty good looking handheld that hopefully looks a lot better than the mock-up and the patent. But really, does it make sense for Sony to jump into the handheld market? Again, things are going well for them with the PS4 and their insurance company. Now, it's not going well for them with, obviously, their phones or their laptop division that they pretty much got rid of, but things are going well with their gaming division. So why would you introduce something that could potentially be a big loss, very big loss leader for them at that point? And why? I don't understand why they would do that. It makes no sense because right now their big goal is to get VR off the ground, because PlayStation VR is the only VR headset, it's the only VR helmet or headset that you have on the market that is attached to a gaming console right now. The Switch doesn't have one, the Xbox doesn't have one, but the PlayStation does. And if they're having production issues right now with the PlayStation VR like they had throughout Christmas time, even leading up to now, why would they introduce something else into the fray that they have to manufacture? That just seems like it's going to make it even harder to manufacture either the handheld, the PlayStation 4, or the PSVR. And at that point, they may be fighting a losing battle against cell phones and tablets, which a lot of people pretend like, oh, people don't game on those things. People game on those a lot. Minecraft is very popular on there. Candy Crush, Clash of Clans. You can pretty much go out on the marketplace and look down the list with things like Boom Beach, where yes, they're not interesting to you as a hardcore gamer, but to the casual gamer, they are interesting. People spend a lot of money on these games, and that's what it comes down to, is money. The amount of money some of these companies make, it is obscene for the amount of, like, the actual expense that goes into it. Some of these companies that do that have like 40 or 50 man teams. And that's it. And they produce things that make, seriously, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars every year. And Sony would pretty much be going up against Nintendo as well, who really Nintendo controls the big trump card, which is Pokemon. If Pokemon didn't exist for Nintendo right now, I think Nintendo would have had a much harder time against the PSP. It might have been a little more even than people realize. Pokemon is really what has swayed Nintendo's handhelds big time. Now there are other really fun games, obviously, but I think everyone's going to agree that Pokemon is the handheld market for Nintendo. And I don't know what Sony would bring to the table. Maybe they buy Monster Hunter, the exclusivity rights to it. Maybe that's what gets them over the top. I don't see any other way, though. I mean, what else would they be able to come to the table with that would possibly compete with Nintendo and Pokemon and Mario and Fire Emblem even? Like, I don't know what you do. And again, if Pokemon now moves over to the Switch and is on the 3DS, I don't know what you do at that point. It's pretty much over for any handhelds that come out other than, like I said, mobile phones that control that free-to-play genre. Now, I would like to see Sony do this, mostly because I enjoy the competition between companies. It makes them better. It makes things better for us, the consumer. Really, if you don't want Sony to make a handheld because they're not making it with your money, they're making it with their money, I'm not really sure why you wouldn't. But if I'm in Sony's shoes, I look at that market as I'm going to stay away from that right now because it's still very uncertain where things are going. I mean, we really don't know where the handheld market's going to go. The 3DS may be Nintendo's last true handheld at this point. They may not think to do it again and just keep with the Switch, since it's technically a blend of both worlds with your TV and your portable unit. But yeah, guys, I'm very curious what your thoughts on this whole thing with Sony right now, possibly showing up to E3 with the handheld. It doesn't make sense to me, but maybe one of you guys have an idea here. Maybe you could come up with a whole plan as to how they can pretty much release a handheld and it be good. Now, of course, if they get rid of the proprietary memory cards, which really hurt the PSP, really hurt the Vita, I think that would be big. Because the Vita, honestly, those memory cards were crazy out of control with price. Maybe they come out with use the, your SDXC memory cards like we do with the Switch and everything's good. But I don't know. I just don't think they have a strong enough first-party presence on the handheld market right now to really push that along. Would they sell units? Absolutely. I would probably buy one. Why not? But I do think in the long run, they would get steamrolled by Nintendo and Pokemon. That's me, though. Again, guys, let me know what you think down in the comments. I'm very curious, and I will see you next time.